welcome to Author Showcase of Oshkosh. I'm Bill Gillard. I'm an English professor at UW Oshkosh. Happy to be here. My partner here, Tom Cannon.
Hello.
Hi, Tom.
Hi. Welcome to Author Showcase. Today we have a real treat. We have Cathe Cofell. She is the new Poet Laureate of Appleton. And so we're going to be asking her about that. Just a little bit about Cathe. She's the winner of the 2019 Mag Street Poetry Book Award for Stick Figure with Skirt. Author of Sister Satellite and 6 other chapbooks of poetry, including Split Personality. And that was in collaboration with Carla Houston. Many, many poems, book reviews, essays. Winner of the Mill Prize for Poetry. And Laureate Nidecker Poetry Prize, Poetry Award from WI Academy. If you go to Wapaka or Appleton's city sidewalks, you will see her poetry right in the sidewalk. And she is very much involved in poetry. She is event coordinator for Poetry Unlocked, and she is immediate past president for the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Cathe.
And you are also founder of the Wisconsin Poet Laureate Commission.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit how that came into being and the importance of that?
Not anything I ever really planned to do. I was, at the time, quite a while ago, the secretary of the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets. And just, going back through old notes, it was all hard copies, so I was going through these old binders, and I saw many, many years ago in the late 80s a discussion about starting a Wisconsin Poet Laureate. And a number of arts organizations talked, and they decided not to pursue it. I thought that was interesting, so I just started asking the question, why not? Why should we? Started doing some research, talked to other arts organizations. They thought it was interesting, and so I happened to know somebody in the governor's office at the time, and they pushed it through. So when it first started, it was a state position. We were just talking a little bit about positions getting funded by the government, and it was started under then Governor Tommy Thompson, but it left the government pretty quickly thereafter. So I had the privilege of founding that, what they call the Advisory Commission, and then the initial founding commission left. And then when it all kind of fell apart, Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters took it under its wing, and then I came back on and chaired it for a number of years then as well.
That's awesome, because if you go to the website, the Wisconsin Poet Laureate website, just a list of important poets of Wisconsin: Max Garland, Dasha Kelly Hamilton, and Nicholas Gulig, Margaret Rosga, and there's just a long tradition of just doing some great things and promoting poetry in Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Cathe, if someone wasn't sure, why is it important for a state like Wisconsin to have a poet laureate?
Well, there's so many reasons. And I was actually thinking about it on the way here. Like, what is it about poetry that has a laureate? There's not a fiction laureate. There's not a, clog dancing laureate.
Let's talk clog dancing laureate.
Let's start a commission.
Well, I've often made jokes that, like, poetry in the grand scheme of the arts is pretty low on the totem pole, I think, of arts that really connect the whole world.
Sure.
And I've often joked we're right there, just under opera but above clog dancing. That's my joke. No offense to anybody who likes to clog dance.
That's fair.
So the fact that we have this position is pretty special. But I think it's because of our very succinct use of words and our ability to really share what's happening in the world at the time via words. And there's so much emotion and power that comes in what comes out of the pen. And especially you think of times like this, how important it is that people feel that they can be heard. I think I've often said, as I'm promoting the arts, that you think about poetry, it's so important to us in the really important moments of our life. You have a baby shower, a wedding, a funeral. You want a poem to really encapsulate that moment. And I believe if poetry is so important in those moments, just think of what it can do for everyday life. And I really do think it has the ability to really put into words and the emotion that we're trying to feel. So I'm blessed to have this gift, and I just really feel it's important that we share it with the world.
Fantastic.
And I think with your poetry, that like you kind of, some of the poetry talks about, being a business lady, a businesswoman, growing up when it wasn't as normal as today, and was a balance and a struggle and stuff. And I think through telling your own personal story, you're also telling the history, an important history of our culture as well.
Absolutely. You guys are both writers. They always tell you when you're starting out to write about what you know. And so a lot of my early books are about my personal life or connections in my life. I write a lot with first person. So a lot of times people think that thing I wrote about was my personal experience. It wasn't necessarily, but it was an experience I felt that needed to be shared. Stick Figure with Skirt is very much my experience. Those are all poems about work. We are celebrating my first day of my retirement today. So, but
congratulations!
Thank you. I've worked nonstop for the last 40 years. So that's what I know, and that's what I wrote about. And yes, in many situations, I felt that I was passed over because I was a woman. Maybe that's not true, but and not in all situations, but certainly I've experienced it firsthand.
Now that you're one day into your retirement, there's a poem that I absolutely love in Stick Figure with Skirt, Career, my third attempt, failed. Is that the title?
Yes.
Do you think about that? I mean, you've been approaching the end of this stage for a while, and now that stage is complete, and you're a few days into retirement. Does that poem feel a little different now?
It does.
You wrote it while you're in the mix and still struggling.
Yes.
But now it's...
Yes, absolutely.
Are you at peace?
I don't know yet. People keep asking me. I've had a lot of people reach out to me today and say, how does it feel? I'm like, it feels like a sick day. It's going to take a few, probably weeks before it all really sinks in. And I very intentionally planned poetry activities for this first month that I'm off, because this would maybe be my fourth attempt. It would be poetry, trying to make, and I wouldn't call it a career, but it's always been my passion, but it's always been on the back burner because of family, work, other commitments. So I'm looking forward to it.
So how do you define that word in terms of that poem, but also in terms of your life now? You use career and poetry in the same sentence there.
Oh my gosh, I just don't even realize I don't even think I did it. Sorry.
Is that something, it could be seen as vocation. There are some people who do it, as a full-time job, know.
Well, I mean, you're a teacher, so do you see it as a full-time job? I don't know. If it is the thing I would have done with my life full-time as a career, if there was enough money attached to it. But I have a very early poem that talks about, and it's called Why I Will Fail as a Poet. And it's all those reasons, all those excuses, the other things that can happen in life. When, I said the most I ever made in 1 year was $1,500, I think, because of sale of books or whatever. So it's never going to pay the bills. But now I'm in a position to really just move it forward in my life, front and center more in my life than ever before.
Where's that poem? Is that in one of your books?
I'm just thinking. I don't know if it is or not. I'll have to look. I should have known that. That poem just came up.
I used to write a lot of songs, a lot of music. And I was like 24, 25, playing loud guitars and things like that. And I wrote a song like predicting how my life was going to go. And I was like, exactly, even down to 2 kids, and having just notebooks full of stuff and like no real resolution. And I was just 24 and I was saying, this is how it's going to go.
That's wild.
And here I am.
That's
and
wild.
did you?
Pretty much so. I mean, again, but mine was a little further along in my career, and it was really for all the excuses. I guess that I was making in fear of really reaching out to that. And, the first line is like, because I love purses and wallets, and like I want to fill them with money and, go shopping. It was just really all those materialistic things, like I want to go on a vacation and but then it really ended, and I don't have it with me, I'm sorry, but it really ended more like some of it to a certain degree is that fear. Like if you're going to abandon all of that materialistic good to do this thing that so passionately fills you up, there's the fear is all that you have there. And so I think I walked away from it. My mom actually said very astutely over the weekend, well, now you don't have an excuse for not doing the things that you didn't want to do. And I was like,
listen to your mom. That's the lesson.
Because often I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I've got work, or I'm so busy.
Or tired.
I can't. I'm so tired. I can't. I should write, but I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow is here, so
yay!
Yeah. So now you're dedicating your life to poetry.
Yes.
You can write all day, every day. How did you handle that balance, and do you have advice for maybe new writers how to fit time to write in, the whole combination of work and career and family?
Well, whoever they are, always says you should make a point of writing every day. I was never able to do that. I wasn't. For me, what works is to take intentional time away. I've had the privilege of doing a couple of writing retreats a year with some good writer friends. We go up to Door County or down south somewhere and just spend a week immersed in writing. And those drafts that I would start during that experience are what I would work on then, because to get into that mode of that creative writing process, often I would find, just as I'm getting started into feeling that groove, I'd have to go to work or I'd have to do something else. So it's so much easier to pick up a draft. And I've got something drafted and just tweak it. So those are the things that I kind of work on. And the other thing I also really stress, though, is to just have poetry in your life somehow. I am always reading. I love to listen to poetry. I've got a couple of poetry podcasts I listen to. I try to attend events when I can, reading. So at least if I'm not writing, I'm still absorbing it, and I think it's part of that like internal creative process. So when I am ready to write, there's
yes.
Content.
What are your favorite podcasts on poetry?
I love Rattle. I got to tell you, I love Rattle. Jeffrey McAndrews has got his podcast, local podcast, and I love that because it's local poets and
North
really
Fond du Lac
talking about
Poet Laureate, Jeffrey
Poet
McAndrews.
Laureate, yes.
Good guy.
Really love that one.
And it's poets have something to say.
Yes.
He does
Thank
it on
you.
Facebook Live, and I actually kind of wait and listen to it on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, that's what I do too.
Yeah.
And then poetry, the Poetry Foundation's got a podcast I listen to every once in a while, but not as much.
Good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea of making time for it in an otherwise busy day.
Yes.
My younger daughter played a lot of hockey, which is awesome because I love hockey. But we were at like the Pettit Ice Center twice a week for a while, which is a bit of a haul. But I found this room upstairs where they stored the chairs and tables that they weren't using, and had a window down onto the ice. It was upstairs. And so I'd bring her to practice. I couldn't wait to get up to my little room. I think I might have not supposed to have been in there, but I had plugged in my laptop. I could see the ice, but I was in I got in just a zone. Yeah. And I trained myself to be, when I slipped into this interstitial place, I was just so productive. And it was a time when, I probably should have been like talking to the other parents and being friendly and making, human contact. But all I wanted to do was to just go up there behind all the junk and just find my little table. And
so
write.
Everybody has to just find their little table wherever that might be. And now I have the whole house, so
Good.
I'm excited.
Good. Hey, you mentioned your work with Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets, and you mentioned, and I know from talking to you in the past how important that word fellowship is to you. And so talk about that. I mean, 'cause there are a lot of writers, probably watching this show right now, tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Yep, millions. The idea of fellowship, though, we all know how to just retreat into our little space. For me, it's way in the back corner of my basement, like where my desk is. But how does fellowship work into being a poet, which is a really quiet, solitary thing most of the time? Talk about fellowship.
Yeah, I think it's really an opportunity to validate what we're doing in that little corner. If you don't connect with other people who are engaged in this craft, you have no idea if you're any good or bad or not. And it is, again, such an isolating craft. And it is, as you said, very easy to just hole up. And I really didn't even know it existed. Laurel Mills taught at what was UW Fox Valley at the time. Loved that woman.
Oh my goodness.
And I had taken an adult class from her, an adult enrichment class from her, and she was the one who encouraged me to just try the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets. And I was terrified. Again, I'd been writing, but once I left college, I had no connection to anybody else who wrote poetry or read poetry. And so to get into this room of all these people who were there for poetry was just baffling and wonderful for me. And so I went that first meeting, and a couple of people just came up to me, and it was the fellowship. They knew I was new, I was young. The fellowship tends to skew a little older, though that shouldn't stop you. But from there, again, just a whole world opened to me. If I think about all the things that I've accomplished with writing now, I truly credit the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets. I met the person who published my first poem outside of college, who published my first chapbook, connected me to the Wisconsin Poet Laureate Commission, connected me to just some of my absolute favorite people in the world, people who are lifelong friends. You mentioned the chapbook that I wrote with Carly Houston. She was also an Appleton poet, also a Wisconsin Poet Laureate. She was my best friend. She is my best friend. She lives in California now, but to find that other person who sort of thinks like you and writes like you, it's just life-altering. And I'll again, credit all that with the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets. And now you're part of us, too.
Here's a Laurel Mills anecdote. It was 2006, and I lived in New York City and New Jersey. But I was interviewing out here for the job that I eventually got at UW Fox Valley. And I'm still there. I love it. And it's heartbreaking a lot of ways. But and so the interview process is amazing. It just takes all day. You meet everybody. You're out to lunch. It's a blizzard of names and all that. And one of the things is an hour-long teaching demonstration, and it was attended by about 100 faculty, staff, students. And I'm up there, and I'm 9 hours into this interview, and I'm going at it, right? And so a big part of creative writing is getting people involved. So I had everybody writing and then reading back to us, and talking with people around them. I was doing like I do in class, and I was hearing from people. All right. Hey, that's pretty good. That's an interesting character you could work with. Seems like there's a lot unresolved there. And I was talking to people, and then I called on this person, and she read her thing that she had just written for the prompt. And I got like goosebumps, and I didn't know, like, it was so good. And I was like, why aren't you up here? Like, that was so...
She's amazing, an amazing woman.
It's just, and her writing, I mean, it could just tear your guts out.
Yes.
Laurel Mills, her books are around, so just,
absolutely.
see if you could find them.
Yeah, she's great. She's really good.
So can you tell us kind of what your influences were, for poetry and just writing in general?
Sure. So again, the high school I went to, poetry was, I don't know, a couple of weeks of a whole English program. So poetry really wasn't something I got into until college. The little bit of poetry I did have exposure to was what I lovingly refer to as the old dead white guys. No offense. Some of them write beautiful poetry, but I just didn't get it. So I went to college initially for journalism, advertising, and then I took a intro to creative writing class from this just quirky guy. I went to UW-Eau Claire, Richard Kirkwood, and he, I wrote a poem. And he gave me like a D or a D- on it. And he said, there's something about you, I know you can do a lot better than this. And there's nothing I love more than a challenge. That's why, and goals, that's what made me really good in the working world. And I just went from there. But he really helped introduce me to amazing female poets that I didn't even know existed. Lucille Clifton, Gwendolyn Brooks, Diane Wachowski, of course Sylvia Plath, and they just blew my head off. They wrote things that I didn't know you could put in a poem.
Homage to my hips.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
What a great poem!
It's a great poem, and that just really opened up my brain.
Yes.
But you also asked about influences. I grew up with music. I wanted to be a musician. I played the piano, I played the saxophone. My mom had an old upright piano. She would play show tunes, and my brother would sit on one side of her and me on the other, and we'd sing along to all these old, Bali High and so it was always part of my life. And
South Pacific was
South
a
Pacific.
big touch point for you?
My mom
loved
loved
goodness.
My mom loved South Pacific.
Did you see it at the PAC? It was there like 10 years ago, something like that. Did you go?
No.
It was such a great production.
Oh, I missed it.
Loved
No.
it. Yeah.
West Side Story, all of those.
Yes.
But I couldn't sing to save my life. I cannot sing to save my life. But I played saxophone.
Let's hear a little song.
No. So music has really influenced my work, I believe. It's just, I hear music in my head when I'm writing a lot of time. I often, as I'm writing a poem, think about, it's kind of funny, the soundtrack of this poem. And sometimes, I have a tendency to want to force the poem to go in my direction, but like in a good soundtrack, then there's a musical twist in the middle, and it's like, no, this is not going to be a happy, fun poem, or no, this is not going to be serious, we're going to take you this way. So, and that I continue now. Again, love music. My son's an aspiring drummer, percussionist, so just music is everywhere in my house. Mm-hmm.
I see that influence in a particular way, and it's the use of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you want, you could read a poem, but I'm going to tell you why I'd like you to read this particular poem.
Okay.
It's chord management.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And here's why. And the first time I encountered that was on the video that you did for Main Street Rag.
Yeah.
It was very well done. It's on YouTube. Find it. It's really well done. You said the title, as poets do.
Yeah.
I didn't quite get the first word. And I thought it was chord, but I thought it was C-H-O-R-D, right?
Oh,
fine.
yeah.
But then it opens up with umbilical cord. Spoiler, I'm going to tell you that. Right? Like, I heard it wrong. So it's chord, it's like umbilical. Okay, so chord management and all. But then this formerly umbilical child turns into an older child who's really into music. Mm-hmm. And wait, did I get it wrong? So chord management, right? And then it ends with the core of yourself, the body, maybe the essence of spiritual and physical self. And so that's some of my favorite stuff. It's a word that was repeated orally, but not on the page. It kept changing. Mm-hmm. And I love that about your stuff. Because you use repetition just brilliantly.
Thank you.
Because it's easy to repeat a word or a sound. But it's hard to make it kind of resonate in different ways. Mm-hmm. The way you see, a field at noon or at sunset, it's a different field.
Yes.
Or in the morning when the spider webs have dew on them and the sun's just coming up, it's a different field. And that's how in chord management I was hearing it, and I couldn't stop smiling. So I'm like, I don't know where this, I don't even know what the word is, and whether it's chord or core. And I just
thank you.
Yeah. So,
and that I appreciate it when somebody gets it, because that's what I love to do with poetry. I like my poems to be really accessible and you can understand them, but I love if you just think about it a little bit more, because it's all of those. It's spelled C-O-R-D, but it is chord in every way that you can think of the use of the
And
word.
then
I love
the
wordplay.
Core as well, which is hard to
Yeah.
distinguish from chord,
Yeah.
or out loud at a
Right.
reading.
Right.
So it's brilliant poem. And
Want to hear it?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay.
please
Yeah.
read- oh my
Okay,
God, this
chord
is great.
management. Oh my gosh. Here, I'm going to do this. No. When your office is a piggly wiggly bag, headphones tangle with charger, tangle with hairbrush, in with pens and clips since the last ladder slip from corner office to carry on. Apple makes a pocket-sized computer, but a charger as thick as a cocaine brick, our insatiable need to power up. A mother who carries her baby in the womb endlessly powers up without plugging in. Old wives say an umbilical cord can wrap a baby's neck if the mother steps over a tangle of rope, which is nonsense. But still, my pregnant friend refused to walk her dog and peed in Drano to predict her baby's sex by the color of the water, blue meaning boy. Our boy came fully clothed, little blue pants and wool socks, matching blue cap, an umbilical grip on a sip cup, my own grip slick from this intentional labor of love and 104 degrees in the shade. He was clearly overdressed and soaked with terror, but this, they said, was custom, a proper accord for first touch. Now this kid is 17 and hot for music, is 24/7 percussive click and chord, C to G, arpeggio to tone cluster, marimba to timpani to snare and back. He practices the art of perfect pitch, asks me to strike a note in my throat while he tries to find it with one touch. When he nails it, I vibrate from my core, meaning central part, as in the heart of an apple, the tether and seeds.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
That
Thanks,
is
Bill.
awesome.
And now it's really attuned to that repetition of sound with four and a chord, and just it ties it together.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime. Well,
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
for the kid, it's a lifetime. All with this sound that links so many pieces.
Thank you.
That's
Yes.
really, really well done. And I hear that, and you talked about your love of music, and a lot of popular music show tunes that you're talking about are distinguished by the repetition.
Yes.
You get a
Yes.
chorus, so you have the word career coming up again and again, and then coming up again and again. It strikes me, your use of repetition is something that holds that collection together.
Thank you. Yes, I've been told by some critics it's a crutch, but it just really is how I hear things and how I. And maybe it's the marketer in me. You got to say things multiple times to sell it or to sink in. I don't know, but again, it is for me. It's the music of it. It's the verse and the chorus and I don't write songs, but I'd love to. Bruce Deathlison is one of my dearest friends, and he's a musician, and he's turned some of my poems into music. He's turned his own poems into music, and there's just such a juxtaposition. That's not the right word, but it's just such a cohesion between those two art forms. It just makes sense to me.
And do you think that, like that criticism, is that I'm looking at this to be critical, because anything that you use, any technique you use, if it works, then it's right and it works.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why musicians use repetition.
Well, and exactly. And I think, part of it is, again, if you're a new writer starting out and you want to get published, it's finding the places that want to publish you. And, early on, I used to get just really devastated by rejection letters. And now I've just come to realize, like, with that journal, that anthology, that book publisher, they're just not the one for you. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
As the only non-poet laureate at this table,
Yeah.
why is it important for a city like Oshkosh or a city like Appleton, not major players on the world stage, but nevertheless, why is it essential for the smaller cities to have a poet laureate?
And I guess I can try to answer that. And I think it's just a matter of trying to help people's voices and to be a voice, you know, and kind of be the flavor of the, you know, of Oshkosh. And, you know, and when they put forth the position and said, let's come do this, I was like, well, I'm not really civic minded. You know, my poems are more personal and they're not really political.
Right.
But I do think that if we can get more poetry out there, get beauty out into the world, then, you know, people can express themselves. They get to find out who they are and share that with other people. And if they can do that, then they'll be happier. And if they're happier, we'll be better as a society.
Very well said. I 100% agree. I just think, and not to get too political, but I've said this a number of times because it's just really frustrating. Wisconsin ranks dead last in funding for the arts from the state government. So I think it's wonderful when you see cities kind of taking control of their own arts funding. And it's not a lot, but it's a start. And again, I think it really shows that connection. In Appleton, we really talked a lot about wanting to use it to build community and to build connections. And, you know, I'm already connected to a lot of the poets in the community, and it's my hope to introduce more people to poetry. And not just to write it. Not everybody has to write it, but to read it, to understand it, to appreciate the value of it. Again, which would make them hopefully understand how important the arts are. That's in general.
The challenge that you love. So that's your challenge right there, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to do it through some really unique things. One of the programs that I'm working on right now is an ekphrastic poetry project, which is writing about artwork. The Trump Museum of Art has its last exhibit in its current space, and they've invited me to invite, there are about 30 poets who have written poems about the artwork. So as people are perusing the art, there's a book, they can read the poem, there's a QR code, they can hear the poet reading it. That for me, I think, is a great way to introduce art or to poetry. Of course, it's another art form, but it's a starting point. So, did you ever have to read a poem at a city council meeting?
No, at the State of the City, I had to do twice.
Okay.
And, you know, I wouldn't, did it? Yeah, the library board I had to. That's a little daunting.
Yeah.
You know, and that was kind of rising to the challenge of it. I had appreciated being able to write a poem about Oshkosh because it helped me to reflect and think about, you know, this is where I raised my kids. This is where I live, to savor it, you know, and so I saw the joy in that and kind of spread it out and help.
Well, I'm not very good at writing on command, which was one of my fears about this position. They don't ask a lot, but I have to write 2 poems upon request a year. So for my reception, which was at the end of September, I wrote a poem about Appleton, and I made a point of saying Timber Smith was there, the mayor was there, and I said, hey, Timber, this is one down. I only need 1 more this year. And he's like, I got it. So, but I agree. I think that was really wonderful to really think about why Appleton? Why have I lived in Appleton all these years? I could have moved to Oshkosh. I could have moved to Neenah. It again really made me think about that.
And here's a gotcha question. It wasn't, but it was a hard question for me. He goes, well, what would you say to those people that don't like poetry? I don't think I had a good answer. Do you have one?
Well, I would say poetry is not for everybody. I mean, I don't like a lot of sports. Sorry, Wisconsin. I know that's a big deal here, but I would challenge those people to find the right kind of poetry. I think most of the people who say they don't like poetry are people who read those old dead white guys in grade school or middle school, and they didn't understand it. It didn't connect to them. So I often will ask those people, well, what interests you? You know, do you like sports? Do you like, let me give you a great Max Garland poem. He's written a great poem about bowling. You know, and when you read, you got to find poetry that really speaks to you.
There's definitely poetry on your interest.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And a style you like.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. So, really like to thank Kat for being here today.
Thank
Cathe
you.
Cofell, she's got books out that are available on her website and elsewhere. Stick Figure with Skirt is most recent one.
Yes.
Is that correct? Good.
Yes.
And and so thank you all for watching. I'm Bill Gillard, and
I'm Tom Cannon. Thanks for spending some time with us. And thank you, Kat.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Author Showcase of Oshkosh with your hosts, Dixie Joe Jarko, Bill Gillard, and Thomas Cannon. We'd love to hear from you, whether you're interested in being a guest on the show, have a question, or want to share your thoughts. Please reach out to us on social media or via email at oshkoshauthorshowcase@gmail.com.